Perfect. All right. So, and just as a reminder, so today's class, we obviously won't be able to finish the whole blanket. So we will just be touching on on a few of the different stitch motifs in the blanket. And for those that we don't get to today, we will be having an additional class. So really, we're just going to try and get through as many different motifs as we can. And we will have a second class in another couple of weeks. I will have to get that date for you. All right. I think we're ready to hand things over to you, Edie.
Okay, great. It's good to see everybody. I actually can't see everybody. I can see a few little people here, but I'm really excited to be here for this Michael's class. It's the first time I have done one, so that's really awesome. And I have, the first thing I want to do is show you the yarn that I'm using. And I don't know if you can see, you're going to stay on the camera. I'm going to, on my face, I'm going to lift up this giant, look at, it's bigger than my head, right? The Caron Anniversary Cakes yarn. It's like, it's really huge, right? This blanket that we're doing uses 2 balls of it to make the whole blanket. So that's pretty awesome. I'm only going to be using 1 color. So I just want to point out that the pattern calls for 2 different colorways, but I'm only going to be using the one because really that's enough yarn to show you how to do some stitches and how to do lots of stitches. I could make half a blanket with this. So we are going to be doing several different stitch patterns. We'll just see what we can get through, but also I'm going to be talking about reading charts and reading the pattern. So I'm a big fan of stitch charts for crochet. So if you're not familiar with following charts, I'll be helping you to do that because basically I'm going to be reading as I do the pattern, I'm going to be reading mostly from the chart. So let's get started. And there we go. Move this big ball of yarn just doesn't even fit out of the frame. It's so big. So here I've printed off the pattern and you can follow along with me if you like. So we have a lot of abbreviations. This is listed as an intermediate skill level. So we may be coming back to look at some of these abbreviations later. But what I'm going to do to start with is just say, well, let's just begin with the running ridges pattern. Now, clearly, I am not going to chain 100 stitches because that would be ridiculous and we would be here all week as I made an entire blanket. So that's no good. So what I'm going to do instead is I've taken a look at the running ridges pattern and I'm going to look at the stitch chart and figure out what my stitch multiple is. And I just decided that I was going to go ahead and chain 16 just like the pattern shows me. So in crochet with crochet symbols, we have the stitch key here. And the cool thing about crochet symbol charts is that each symbol represents a stitch and you can see where the stitch goes and you can see the relationship of the stitches to each other. So I can very quickly look at this running ridges pattern and without even having to pull out my instructions here and read through that, which I could certainly do, I can just look at this and say, well, it starts with a chain. And then these little plus signs are single crochets. We're talking American crochet terminology here. And then we have some half double crochets and then some more single crochets. But look, as you do row 3, you have a front post double crochet. So I can see all that just from looking at the chart. So that to me is really nice to be able to just get an overall view. And I can also see that I'll be putting post stitches around post stitches. So I get an overall visual of what's going to be happening as I work this stitch pattern. So just to get started a little bit, I am going to pull out some yarn here. And I have already done the first row of single crochet just to get started. So here I am, and let me just double check to make sure I have the right number of stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and I lost one. So let me do that last one again. And I have been working these into the back bump of the foundation chain, which is what I like to do, but you can work into the foundation chain any way you want. So here I am just with my little sample, and I'm going to chain 2 and turn. Now, I don't know right off the bat whether the chain 2 counts as a half double crochet. So I go back to my instructions, and I notice on page 2 of the instructions, because it says chain 2 at beginning of row does not count as half double crochet. So I know that that chain 2 is not going to count. And I can also see here that it doesn't count as a stitch because my first half double crochet is shown directly over that single crochet. So what that looks like then is there's my chain 2, and I'm going to ignore the chain 2 and just work the first half double crochet into the first stitch. Understanding where the first and last stitches of a row go are the very most important thing in order to keep your blanket edge straight. So you really need to understand turning chains and know whether that turning chain is going to count as a stitch or not count as a stitch, because that's going to affect where you put that first stitch and where you put the last stitch of the row. So I'll do half double crochets all the way across. Those are pretty easy. It's just yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3 for half double crochet. And if you have trouble getting a good row gauge or matching a row gauge, we haven't talked about row gauge yet, but you want to make sure that you are not leaving your loop way down here like this when you make a half double crochet. You want to pull that loop up a little bit so that you get a little bit of height in your row. And when I come across, I want to make sure that I'm working the last half double crochet into the last single crochet. And it's a good idea to stop and count every few rows. So I'm going to stop and count and make sure that I still have 15 stitches. If you're doing the blanket, you want to stop and count and make sure that you have 99 stitches, because that's what you would have at this point. So let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Good, I'm good. All right, so now we're going to turn and chain 1 and single crochet in the first 3 stitches. So let's pay attention to where that stitch goes. Here's my chain 1. The loop on my hook does not count as a stitch. So my chain 1 is this stitch right here, and my first single crochet goes right here. So I'm going to do 3 of those. 1, 2, 3. And then we get to do a front post double crochet around the post of that half double crochet. So a front post double crochet is yarn over, and instead of going into the stitch, I'm going to go around the post. So I'm going to dig down, go from front to back to front, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and complete my double crochet. So it sticks out. It's a texture stitch and it sticks out from my background. Now I'm going to skip the stitch that's behind the stitch I just made. So I'm going to skip this stitch right here and work into the next one. So I'm going to do 3 more single crochets. 1, 2, 3, and do another front post double crochet. So yarn over, go around the post, and complete my double crochet. So we're just repeating that across. I'm skipping that stitch behind the stitch I just made and do 3 more. 1 more post stitch, front post, and then end with 1, whoops, should not split my yarn, 1, 2, 3. And if I've done it right, I will end with 3 single crochets. So that just tells me that I have the right number of stitches. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm reading or when I'm learning a pattern or doing a pattern is try to read my fabric that I'm creating. So I can read the pattern, I can read the words in the pattern, and I can read the chart. But now I want to read my work and see what's going on. So I want to recognize that I have a row of single crochet, a row of half double, and then I had a row of single crochet with these long or post stitches here. Because if I can recognize those post stitches, it's going to make it easier for me when I do the rest of the rows. So I'm going to turn. And the next part is pretty straightforward because we're going to chain 2 and do just a plain row of half double crochet. So skip those 2 chains and do my half double crochets all the way across. So it's kind of like I don't have to think at all on this row. And by the way, I may hold my yarn a little bit differently than you do, or hold my hook a little bit differently. And it doesn't matter. However you do your half double crochets is fine. Some people do like this. This is how I teach, but I end up reverting to what I learned when I was 6 or whenever it was I learned to crochet, taught myself to crochet. So here I am at the end of the row. I should probably go back and count, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to turn, and now the last row I did and the next row I did are the rows that are going to continue. They're the ones that I will repeat for this stitch pattern. And it's pretty much like row 3, but slightly different. So I turn and I chain 1, and I'm going to work my first single crochet, first 3 stitches or single crochet. But now I'm going to do a front post double crochet around that post. Remember that I said you want to recognize the post stitch. That's because that's what I'm going to be working around. So I can just do a yarn over, go around that post. So it's a front post stitch, front to back to front, yarn over, pull up a loop. You want to pull that loop up a little bit higher than you might otherwise. So you're pulling it up like this, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now I'm creating that ridge. I'm going to skip the stitch that's behind that stitch and single crochet into the next 3. Here I am, time to do it again. Go around the post with a front post double crochet, skip the stitch behind it, and work into the next 3. So at this point, I am not reading my chart. Here's my chart. There's my long double crochet or front post double crochet going all the way into the other post. I'm not reading my text or my chart because I have gotten in my head what I'm going to do. I do 3 singles, and then I do that post stitch. And then I end with 3 singles. So my goal when I'm doing a pattern like this is to learn the stitch pattern and then try to go as much as possible from what my fabric says. Yes, this is row 5. So I want to go from what my fabric says once I learn what the stitch pattern is. And this is a really good one to do because it is so repetitive. So if I had to guess, but I don't have to guess because I really do have it with me here, I'm going to repeat rows 4 and 5. So let me do row 4 again, chain 2, turn my first stitch 1, 2, I skip those 2 and I put a half double crochet here. So at this point, all my wrong side rows are just half double crochets, and all my right side rows are a combination of single crochet and front post double crochet that's worked around the previous post or the previous front post double crochet. So that's where that ridge is, that you get some vertical ridges going there. So I'll just do this one more time. I'm thinking this is not a super portable project because the ball's so big, but you know what? That's okay. We're not going anywhere anyway, right? We're all staying home. Okay, so I'm going to do that row 5 one more time. I'm going to a chain 1 and turn and chain 1. 1, 2, 3 single crochets. Front post stitch around the previous post stitch. And it's pretty easy to see that post stitch because they're really sticking up. Skip the stitch behind it, single crochet into the next 3. Post stitch again. And then one last post stitch. And of course, you're doing the blanket, so it's going to be many more repeats of it for you. Then work into the last 3. So for the pattern, you just repeat those rows 4 and 5 as many times as you need to complete that section. And that is the running ridges pattern. So let's move on to the horizontal ridge pattern. And now this one, the chart doesn't show you with a foundation chain, and that's because the foundation chain was only for the beginning of the blanket. But we're not at the beginning of the blanket right now. So I want to stop and take a look at the written instructions, because one thing that happens in this pattern is sometimes you have to increase or decrease between the sections because there's a different gauge for different patterns or for different stitch patterns. And I want to talk about gauge for a few minutes. So I have not done a gauge swatch here because I don't care. This is just for demonstration purposes, but I am using the suggested size hook. Gauge matters always, 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 always. Could you switch back to my face for a minute, please? I'm gonna get on my little soapbox here for just a minute and explain why gauge always matters. Sometimes it's not crucial, but it always matters, because gauge is not only a measurement of the number of stitches and rows over a distance, but it tells us something about the fabric that we're making, right? So you can have the same yarn crocheted a different gauge, and you can have a really stiff fabric or really loose fabric. And if you think of the kind of fabric you want for a blanket that's kind of cozy or whatever, but you don't want to stick your fingers through it, right? Have you ever had an Afghan where, you know, you wrap up in it and you get all tangled up because your fingers and toes go through it? You don't want that. The other thing that can happen if you're not matching the pattern gauge, even if you like the fabric that you're getting, is that you could run out of yarn. And I know people who say, I never do a gauge swatch. I never do gauge. It never matters. And I'll say, and they say, but patterns never tell me to get enough yarn. Like there's a clue there. So your gauge also informs the amount of yarn you're using. So I'm sorry, but even on a blanket, it matters. And now everybody's just going to quit and leave me to do the rest of the patterns on my own because they didn't want to hear me stand on my soapbox and say that. But I felt like I really had to say it. Okay. So because gauge is a measurement of the stitches and the rows per inch or per however many inches. Sometimes when you're switching between stitch patterns, you're going to have to change, because even with the same hook size and the same yarn, the stitch pattern itself can draw in or spread out. So I wanted to check that I'm not going, that I don't have to change numbers here. Okay, let's get back to my hands. And I'm going to get a little drink here. Okay. So I've checked and it doesn't tell me that I need to change stitch numbers, but it does say that I need to break off A and join B, but I have mentioned I'm not changing colors. So you're just going to have to go with this same beautiful pink color that I've got here. We're not switching to something else. So the next pattern is the horizontal ridged pattern. And it starts out with a right side row with half double crochet. So I have not done that. I should end. I'm going to have to, I should have been giving you my lecture about gauge as I was doing this half double crochet row, and I didn't do that. So I'm going to do this anyway. All right. So I want to end, I'm ending with a wrong side row for my running ridge pattern. So that's what this is, the running ridge pattern that I'm finishing. And then my horizontal ridge pattern also has me doing a row of half double crochet. Now this horizontal ridge pattern is one I really wanted to show you because it uses the third loop of the half double crochet, which is kind of a new concept to a lot of people. It's kind of weird in that you're not working into the place you would normally work into. I'm going to pull out a bunch of yarn here. So the first row of it, right side row, is just chain 2 and half double crochet in each stitch across. So that's just what I did. But what I want you to notice as I do this half double crochet is that I end up with another loop across the back. And you can kind of see that. Do you see this row of half double crochets I did before? Do you see how there's another loop here? And it's because of the way the half double crochet is worked with that yarn over and then pulling through everything. So this is only something you can do, the sort of third loop half double crochet, as far as I know, is only done with half double crochet stitches. And I do feel like it's important for me to say half double crochet in America because it's half treble crochet if we were in England, and people here can be all over the world, I guess, right? I don't know where everybody is. So if you're in England, I'm going to be doing a half treble crochet. And strangely enough, it's the same stitch. Okay, so here comes the fun part. I'm ready to start row 2. I'm going to turn and chain 2. Then I'm going to put 1 half double crochet into the first stitch, just a regular working under the top 2 loops. Now, the next part is the weird part. The pattern says work 1 half double crochet into horizontal bar created below stitch in previous row. Bar is below loops normally worked on wrong side. See diagram. So you can look at this diagram, but I want you to look at the stitch that I have here. There's the top of my V, which is where I would normally put a stitch. But instead, I'm going to roll it away from me and recognize that there's another loop right there. See that loop? So I'm going to do a yarn over and do a half double crochet working from bottom to top under that loop. So I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3. I'm going to do that all the way across. So I'm working all my half double crochets under that loop, not into the top of the stitch, not into that V that forms the top of the stitch. And if you want, I actually find it easier to kind of fold that over. I don't know if you can see, normally I'd be working up here, but I just sort of fold it over so I can see where that front loop is. Sometimes this is called a third loop. It's one of those things in crochet, there's so many places we can put our hooks. It can be hard to know exactly what to call it. We don't have an agreed upon name for this, as far as I know. But it's a cool technique because where the fun really happens is when I turn it around. So here I am, I'm working to the last stitch. Now the very last stitch, I'm just going to work a half double crochet under both loops in the normal way. And before I turn it over and show you the magic that just happened, because the magic's on the other side, I do want to make a point about this chart. And I noticed when I was doing this chart, here's this little, I don't know what you call it, almost a little arrow that's showing me that that is working in the horizontal bar. And the chart actually has a small error in that it has the first and last stitches also worked in the horizontal bar, but the first and last stitches are just plain. So it shouldn't have that little arrow thing there if you want to mark that. So generally charts are great, and it's really easy for people who are drawing charts to make a simple error like that, but it's no big deal. Even if you do it that way, it's just hard to see that third loop when you are doing the first and last stitch. Now, here's the big reveal. I want you to, here's the piece I just finished. Whatever, that's the wrong side. So when I turn it over, look at what just happened. You see that stitches that almost look like a chain? Those are the tops of that double crochet. So if I'd worked into these stitches, you wouldn't see that, but because I worked into that third loop, it folded the stitches forward and left the top of that previous row facing out. So that is really cool, I think. So now I'm going to do that again, another row of that, chain 2, and this is just like doing all of them. Like this is all we're doing. So we're going to work under both loops. And then here I go again. I'm going to look for that third loop. And this time it's folding those stitches to the back. And I'll show you that in just a second. Let me do a few more stitches so you'll be able to see what's happening. So normally it's that V, but it's folding it to the back, and that's going to show up on the other side. So it is a reversible stitch. It's just that this only, the fun part only happens every other row. So you get these horizontal ridges kind of every other row. One side goes to the front for the right side and one side goes to the wrong side. So just so you can see it, you can see it's not there, but yay, there it is on that side.
Edie, we have had a question come through.
Yeah.
And a stitch sampler like this, what would you suggest that people should do about gauge swatching? Is there a particular motif that you would suggest they should swatch over the other?
That's a great question. So let me go back to the pattern and let's see what the pattern says about gauge. So here we go. Here is one side and here's the other side. So I'm back here. That looks good. Let's take a look at the pattern and see what it says. So this pattern gives me a gauge of 8 single crochet and 9 rows equals 4 inches. So what that's telling me is basically, even though none of this is in single crochet, they're saying, hey, look, I know that, or we know that there are a whole bunch of stitch patterns here, and we know that you are not going to do a gauge swatch in all 8 or whatever patterns it is. So, hey, how about doing it in single crochet? And it's going to be close enough. If you do a gauge swatch that gives you this gauge, then you will be close enough. you will be close enough to, having it work in all the other stitch patterns. Now, could you switch back to my face again for a minute, please? Because I also want to say about over 4 inches. So 8 single crochets and 9 rows over 4 inches. That do not do a 4-inch swatch. Okay. If you do a 4-inch swatch and you try to count 8 single crochets, your gauge is going to be off because the edge stitches are looser. They're not going to be the same. So you need to make your swatch bigger, especially when you're using super jumbo yarn like this. I make a swatch that's like 8 inches because I want to be able to measure. If your gauge is a little bit off, your size is going to be way off because of the size of the yarn. So I make a nice big swatch to make sure that I'm able to measure that really carefully. So just because it says so-and-so stitches in 4 inches, that does not mean you crochet 4 inches. You crochet 6 inches or more, and then you measure it, row gauge and stitch gauge. So that's important, even for a blanket. I'm sorry. Okay. So if your gauge is off, you're going to go up a hook size or down a hook size. If you have too many stitches per inch, that means your stitches are too small and you need to up your hook size. If you have too few stitches per inch, that means your stitches are too wide. You need smaller stitches. So you need to go down a hook size and try it again. And then you do that as many times as you need to get your gauge or to match the gauge. Okay. And somebody said, I can't check the chat all the time, but I will say, in terms of trying to tighten your tension or loosen your tension, that could work, but you're going to have to maintain that over an entire blanket. And chances are that even if you're trying to crochet more tightly or trying to crochet more loosely, you're not going to be able to maintain it. You will revert to your normal tension and your blanket will go like this, or it will go like this or whatever. And if you've ever had a blanket that went like this, it could be because you were trying to work tight or you're trying to work loose. Okay. All right, let's move on to the texture pattern, which is diagram 3 on page 5. So let's see what that texture pattern is. I'm going to take a look at it here, and it looks like there are some front loop stitches because all those little, what I call smileys, you see those little upside down or half a circles, those are back loop stitches, sorry. So it looks like we're going to be working into some back loops at some point and then some chains and have some more long stitches. So let's see what that looks like. Now this wants me to start on a right side row, and guess what? I didn't end on a, I'm going to have to start doing that. Somebody needs to tell me that I need to end. I'm just going to go a little bit faster, I think, by working some half doubles across here. So I'm not working into the third loop here because I just want to get back to the right side because I don't know, I'm a little OCD about wanting the right sides to all be on the right side just so I don't get confused. That would be another thing to watch out for while you're making this blanket, is that it would be easy to lose track of which row you're on and maybe not do a wrong side row and then start your stitch pattern and it's worked the other way. You may not care, but you might want to, if you really want it to look good, you probably want to make sure that you are making sure that all the right sides are right side. Maybe you want to put a marker on the right side and just check that from time to time, especially when you're switching back and forth between stitch patterns. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Just like to check before I start in on the next one. And just make sure I still had 15 here. All right, so it looks like the diagram 3, the texture pattern, it looks like we're going to be repeating 4 rows. And this wants me to use B, but I'm not using B, I'm using my one color. So I'm going to chain 1 single crochet back loop. So back loop single crochet. So normally when I work a stitch, I work under both loops. So I would be working under both loops of the V. But a back loop single crochet is just working in half a stitch. So it's working in just the back loop of that V. So I'm going to single crochet there. And when it says back loop means the one farthest away from my body. So it has nothing to do with which is the right side and which is the wrong side. The front loop is always the one that's closest to me, and the back loop is the one that's furthest away from me. So that was single crochet in the back loop of the first stitch, chain 1, skip next stitch, single crochet in the back loop of the next one. Repeat from asterisk to the end of the row. So it's chain 1, skip 1, back loop, single crochet, chain 1, skip 1, back loop, single crochet. Guess what? I don't have to look at the chart and I don't have to look at the text because I can just see what I'm doing. Work all the way across. And when I get to the last stitch, I'm going to work into the back loop there, turn, chain 1, then single crochet into the first stitch. And this time I'm single crocheting under both loops. Now it says chain 1, skip next chain 1 space. And there's my chain 1 space. You can see I can stick my finger in the chain 1 space because this is big yarn. And I'm going to single crochet into the next single crochet. So this time I'm doing chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, skip a stitch or skip the chain space and single crochet into the next stitch. So again, I can just work into each stitch with a chain in between. Okie doke. Oops, and I split my yarn, have to be careful not to do that. So I've worked all the way across into the last stitch. It's not a bad idea to stop and count. I'm pretty confident that I have done it correctly, but that's all right. You should probably stop and count. Again, you're going to have 99 stitches. It's worth the time to stop and count all 99 stitches to make sure you're keeping up, because it's easy to lose stitches and you just want to do that every few rows. It's really worth the time. And you're going to have to tell everybody to stop talking to you while you count. You know, does anybody ever do that thing when somebody walks into the room and asks a question and you go 88, 89, 90, whatever, like, and they, if they live with you, they know to shut up until you're through, right? Or is that just me? Maybe not just me. Okay. Where were we? I think we're on row 3, which is where the excitement happens. Okay. So this, if I'm doing it in a different color, it tells me to join the other color and turn, but I'm not doing a different color. So now I'm going to chain 1, single crochet in the first single crochet, and then let's see what this pattern says. Working in front of chain 1 spaces, 1 DC in back loop only of skipped single crochet 3 rows below. Whew, okay, that's a lot to read. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so working in front of the chain 1 space. So there's my chain 1 space and there's my chain 1 space. Remember, I have 2 chain 1 spaces stacked on top of each other. See that? I'm going to double crochet in the back loop only of the skipped stitch. So there is my skipped stitch. You see that V that's going sideways. I'm going to double crochet. So yarn over and double crochet in the back loop only. So just in that back loop, but I got to bring my hook forward in front of those chains. Then do my double crochet. Don't you worry, I'm going to show you again. Okay, let me single crochet in the next stitch, and then I'm going to do that again. So here we go. And let me move this out of the way. All right, I'm going to, let's see, would it help to have a little white behind it? Maybe that will help a little bit. So I'm going to yarn over because I'm doing a double crochet. Then I'm going to go 3 rows down and find that skipped stitch. And I'm going to double crochet just in the back loop of that skipped stitch. So I'm going to hold on to this, come down here, go from the center of the stitch to the back of the stitch, but I can't go all the way through like this because then I'm not keeping those chains to the back. So I'm going to go through and bring it out to the front. So those chains are still behind my stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and then complete my double crochet. Okay. Single crochet in the next stitch, do it again. I'm sorry this is purple yarn because it's not as easy to see the purple, but hopefully you're starting to recognize where that skip stitch is. Do you see the stitches around this stitch all have been, the back loop has been used. Can you see that back loop's been used and that back loop's been used, but this one hasn't been used. So I'm going to yarn over, go in, and then kind of out again. So I'm keeping those chains to the back and do my double crochet. Single crochet in the next stitch. At least the pattern's not hard to memorize because you're only doing 2 stitches. So yarn over, there's my skip stitch because I can see that the back loops have been used in the others. And interestingly, you may have noticed that I have changed the way I'm holding my hook, which is kind of interesting to me. Normally I'm a pencil holder like this, but for some reason, I'm finding it easier to do this stitch by using the knife hold, by holding my hand over it like this. So don't be afraid to try to adjust your grip a little bit to see if you can get those angles you need. The angle of the hook is a little bit different, or the angle of attack is a little bit different for this. So let's see, have I lost my way? I should be able to find a stitch. Can you recognize where that free stitch is? I can see that here's one hanging out right here, and it has a back loop ready to be worked into. So I'm going to do that. And work into the single crochet, and then I've got one more. I'm just going to do that really fast. And then the last stitch, work into the last stitch and turn. And after all that excitement, you can see, I'm sorry, it's purple, so you can't really see, but it kind of goes up, down, up, down, up, down. After all that excitement, row 4 is nothing but chain 1 and single crochet in each single crochet across. So yay. I think we all know how to do that. And that's like a wrong side row that allows us to be, relaxed about it. So get back over here and we'll take a look at what that texture pattern looks like. Now, if you are using 2 colors, the way it's called for in the pattern, is going to look a little bit different. You can see the picture there, and I'll put it down here so we're looking at the same thing. So you can see here these kind of up, down, up, down, up, down. But if you're using 2 different colors, you can see that there's kind of a spike of color going down. So it is going to look different on mine than it does if you're using 2 different colors. So just be aware of that. All right, let me take a quick drink here. Because of the amount of time that we have left, I want to skip the arrow pattern for now because that one's a little more challenging. And let's just skip on over to the, what do they call it? The next one, the single crochet chain 1 pattern, which is diagram 6. because what you can see here is it's sort of similar to what we just did in that it's chain one, single crochet, chain one, single crochet, chain one. You may know this as seed stitch. It's sometimes called crocheted seed stitch, but I think that's one that we can do in the amount of time that we have left, and then we'll scoot over to the other ones the next time. So that crocheted seed stitch happens, let's see where that, or right here on page 3. So if you want to read the words, it's on page 3. And if you want to read the chart, that's on page 6. So here I am on a right side row, ready to do my seed stitch or single crochet chain one pattern. There are different names for it depending on who you are. So we're going to chain one and single crochet in the first stitch, then chain one, skip one stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, all the way across. Chain one, skip one. And hopefully you can really see what's going on there. That's hopefully easy for you to recognize that pattern. And if you had the right number of stitches, you end up with a single crochet in the last stitch as well. I'm going to chain one and turn. And here's where I find having a chart is really, really helpful. I'm going to hold this up so you can really see it. Notice that in row 2, which is the kind of blue row, if you printed it out in color, you have 2 single crochets in a row. You have a single crochet in the first stitch and a single crochet in that chain one space, then a chain one and a single crochet in the next space. Now, whenever you're working a stitch over a space in crochet, the default or the thing that you will do, unless it says otherwise, is to work into the space itself. So what I'm going to be doing on row 2 is just working into the spaces with a chain in between them. So I put a single crochet in the first stitch. And now I'm going to be working in spaces. So only in spaces across from here on out. So there's my space. I'm not trying to dig down and work into the stitch. Can you see that? Move this out of the way. This would be working into the stitch. All right, so there's a strand under my hook and strands over my hook. That's not what I want to do. I want to work right there in that space. And with this big yarn, I can stick my finger right in there. Single crochet in that space, chain one, single crochet in the next space. I'm skipping the stitches and only working into the spaces. This is one of my very favorite crochet stitch patterns, I should say. You can use it for so many things, and it makes a lovely fabric. So I've worked into there's chain one to get over that stitch and then work into the last space. There's my very last space, and work the last stitch into the last single crochet. So one way to think about this is that all my wrong side rows, because this is the wrong side, are going to start out with a stitch with 2 stitches. And then I'm going to start doing the chain spaces because I have 1 stitch in the edge and then 1 in the first space. All my right side rows are going to be the same in that it's going to be work into the first stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, and look, there's a space. So I'm going to work into that space. Chain 1, skip 1, work into the space. And one reason I like this stitch pattern is because it's a whole lot easier to work into a space than it is to work into a stitch. So I'm not having to dig down. I'm not having to try to find that back loop of my double crochet, whatever that was, or that third loop of the half double crochet. I'm just going, bam. So like I can watch TV and do this at the same time. I can even watch TV with subtitles if I need to. Or closed caption. Does anybody else watch British TV and have to have the closed captioning on because you can't understand what they're saying? So that's the thing with us. I'm like, it doesn't matter how high I turn it up, I still can't understand them. It's like they're speaking a different language. So here I went, whoops, you know, I got excited and I forgot to do my last chain. So single crochet in the space, forgot that chain one, single crochet in the last stitch. Let me do one more just so you can see what that looks like. I'm doing a wrong side row. So wrong side rows, we're going to start out with a stitch in the first stitch and then a stitch in the space. Chain one, skip one. And if you're not quite sure, if you don't think you're looking at that space, you're not sure what the space is, well, this is giant yarn. Where can you stick your finger through? If you can stick your finger through it, then you're good. That's where it goes. I can't see this purple yarn very well myself, so there we go. It's beautiful yarn, just it came up purple when we didn't want it to. I think the pink was much nicer for showing on video. Okay, so there's my last space and then my last stitch. So it's super easy on this pattern to forget to do that last chain one. Remember a minute ago, I forgot to do that chain one. So you really do want to stop and count to make sure you're not losing stitches. Another thing you can do is put a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of each row. So that way, if you are sort of losing track of which is the first stitch and which is the last stitch, you use two stitch markers. You put one on this side and one on this side. And when you come back at the end and you get to the other side and you go, oh, look, there's one more stitch because there's a stitch marker hanging out there saying, hey, put a stitch here, right? So that's one way you can do it to keep straight. So hopefully, let me turn this around. Now, one thing I've noticed, we talked about gauge and we talked about stitch gauge being different. Do you notice that it's a little wider down here than it is up here? So I don't know whether that's really noticeable if I'm blocking it or whatever, but it looks to me like this gauge, if I went and measured it, this gauge is tighter than this gauge. So I'm not sure. I haven't seen the actual blanket. I don't know if it goes in and out a little bit, but it does look to me like this gauge is, you know, wider because I didn't lose stitches. I can 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I still have 15 stitches. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but you know, it's okay. It's a swatch, it's a blanket. We're not really bothered by it that much. So I'm going to stop right there. And Allison, are there any questions that I need to answer, anything we didn't get to? Because I hate to just talk and see if I missed something.
I feel like we covered a lot of the questions or most of the questions that come up. If you have a question that we didn't get to, feel free to drop it in the chat since we do have a few minutes left here. And we can try and get to you. And just as a reminder that the continuation of this class will be on March 4th. I don't see that it is listed yet online, but check back at michaels.com/online classes to sign up for that as well.
And you can always find me on, I have a website that's edieeckman.com. That's EDIEECKMAN.com. And I think somebody asked about my cowl. You can find that in my patterns on my website. It's the easy to wear cowl because you know what? It's easy to wear. And you know what's awesome about cowls, especially when you're Zooming a lot? All you have to do is just pop one on and it doesn't matter what you're wearing because then you look dressed. And my daughter who works from home now and is in a lot of Zoom meetings just keeps her cowls now. She said they're not even in the closet. They're just next to my desk. So if she has a conference, she can just pull them on. So yeah. And you know, you could use this, just thinking here with the blanket. There's no reason you have to use 99 stitches and make a blanket, because I bet that you could use one ball of variegated yarn and these stitch patterns and make a scarf. And that would be pretty awesome too. So, you know, if you don't feel like committing to a blanket, use a scarf, make a scarf, or make a baby blanket or whatever. So that's great. And I hope it was okay for my first Michael's class. Hope it did okay.
Absolutely. Thank you all
You're
so
going to have me
much.
back? Well,
Yes.
you have to have me back, because we have to do some more stitch patterns.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Edie. And thank you everybody so much for joining. Just as a reminder, this recording is going to be available online at michaels.com/classes. And come back and see us again at another Michaels Community Classroom. We can't wait to see you all again. Awesome. Thank you so much, Edie.
Great to be here. Happy crocheting, everybody.
Bye, everyone.